Across the globe, justice systems are being reimagined through trauma-informed care, desistance theory, and neuroscience. At the forefront of this movement stands a voice for change, a trainer of professionals, and a storyteller committed to evidence-based reform. This is The Criminologist, the podcast exploring the people, the practices, and the possibilities shaping a more humane justice system. And now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidson.
Hello and welcome to episode 245 of The Criminologist Podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. In this episode, I am joined by Dianna Kalandros, Director of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council in Coconino County, Arizona. This is a conversation about collaboration, innovation, and what it means to humanize the justice system in practical, concrete ways. On this podcast, we often talk about evidence-based practice, behavior change, desistance, responsivity, and the importance of helping people succeed in the community. But those ideas only matter if they make their way into real systems, real agencies, real courtrooms, real probation departments, and real communities. That is one of the reasons I was excited to talk with Dianna. Her work invites us to think about some of the long-standing issues in probation and corrections through a different lens. Not simply, how do we respond when people fail, but what would it look like to create more opportunities for people to succeed? In this episode, we talk about the role of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Councils, the importance of bringing stakeholders together, the use of incentives, removing barriers, and how small but intentional practices can begin to change the culture of justice work. One example that really stood out to me was the Client of the Month project. On the surface, that may sound simple, but as Dianna explains, the impact was deeper than recognition alone. It helped stakeholders see clients differently. It created a space where people were recognized for effort, progress, and change. And in a field that can sometimes become overly focused on deficits, violations, and risk, that kind of shift matters. So today's conversation is about more than one program or one county. It is about what becomes possible when justice systems ask better questions, work across silos, and remember the humanity of the people they serve. Please enjoy my conversation with Dianna Kalandros, and I'll see you all on the other side. Well, Dianna, so nice to have you on the program. Why don't we kick things off as we typically do with giving you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience. Essentially, just let our listeners know what your career trajectory was like as far as your education background, vocational background, what really got you to the spot that you're at today.
Oh, and thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor to be on your podcast. I appreciate the information you provide. I've been listening for a long time, and I love to hear the interviews that you have with other experts in the field.
Oh, thank you. That really means a lot to me. Yeah, people sometimes often ask me the natural questions about number of listeners and number of downloads. And I try to tell them I don't interpret success by number of downloads as opposed to rather the impact being made. So I would rather have a smaller select group of loyal listeners who are in those decision-making roles or really looking to learn than just a mass audience and it's all about the analytics. So yeah, I appreciate you being a a part of the fan base, and now welcome to the guest list, Dianna. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much. So I think I have a little bit of a different background in a lot of ways. I actually started out as a behavioral health professional. So I am an independently licensed clinical counselor, and I am a clinical supervisor as well. And my career started out in community mental health, where I saw anyone who walked through the door. And a lot of my clients were referred by probation, both juvenile and adult, for mental health counseling, individual and family. So got a little bit of my toes wet with the criminal justice system through that. And then I moved into an area where I was doing more in-home work. And as it so happened, it became part of my experience where some of my clients were on supervised probation. Probation would come at the same time that I was providing my counseling services. And it was just interesting that we were seeing the same people. And about 2007, there was an opportunity to go to work as a mental health court liaison in Pinal County, Arizona, and blended a lot of the behavioral health background with criminal justice. There was some training pieces for law enforcement and court personnel on mental health. This was just such an exciting opportunity, and I was so fortunate, honestly, to apply and to get the job. And then that job really just kind of evolved in a lot of ways. The role changed and grew. It ended up being transitioned to being housed in court administration.
Oh, wow.
And so I really dealt with everything that had mental health or substance abuse within the court. So Rule 11, competency evaluations, restoration of competency. In Arizona, it's Title 36, so an involuntary mental health commitment. Title 14 is guardianships. So everything and anything. I work directly with adult and juvenile probation to help facilitate getting mental health or substance abuse treatment, answering questions. I worked with our adult and juvenile detention centers, just facilitating conversations. If there was somebody that correctional health was really concerned about, they would call me. I'd help get them released to the appropriate service providers. And from there, I ended up at the city of Tempe, Arizona, where I was the supervisor over community supervision. We ran our own internal municipal community supervision, which is a little bit unusual. And I was also the clinical director over the city's counseling agency. So that was a really neat mix as well. And then from there, I transitioned into my current role, which is the director of criminal justice the director of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which is a really, again, kind of unique and special role as the way it is developed here.
Yeah, and I want to dive into your role with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. But as I was reflecting on your response to my question, I love it because it's another illustration of the fact that in this field, there's no hard and true pathway, I guess. I mean, there's so many pathways into this field, and I think it speaks to the difficulties of the field as well. It's very unique. You're wearing so many different hats. I love how you spoke too, that you're bundling all those stakeholders together in your view. That's one thing that drove me crazy as a practitioner, and truth be told, was one of the motivations behind the creation of the TIDE supervision model that I co-created with Nicole Kimberly Staley, was the recognition that when you look at the perspective of our clients who may, yes, for example, Monday, I have an appointment with my probation officer. Tuesday, I'm going to go see my chemical dependency counselor. On Wednesday, I'm going to talk to a mental health professional that I was referred to. And on Thursday, I'm going to talk to somebody about my housing issues. And none of those people talk to each other. all of those various stakeholders have different definitions of what a win looks like.
Yes.
And then against the backdrop of that, we wonder why that individual struggles to succeed. So as you spoke about your diverse background that you're bringing in, it has been reflecting too. I taught a lot in years past, both the undergraduate and graduate level, but it may have shifted now. But for the longest time, and you can tell me what it's like in Arizona, at the university level, if somebody decided I want to be a probation officer when I grow up, they were ensconced in the criminal justice department for coursework, corrections, probation, parole. And then they get to the field and they realize, wow, this is not as much criminal justice as it is social work or chemical dependency work or mental health work or change work in general.
Mm-hmm.
I applaud the fact that, you took that, I almost a non-traditional approach, but it's not. It's traditional in that there is no traditional approach. So
right. We're all working with people, and we're all trying to look at behavioral change, shifting into more pro-social activities and more positive outcomes.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I know when I used to I still train, but when I trained still in my government role, I used to tell the probation officers I trained, hey, listen, you have a really hard job. And I was not being flippant. And I said that in the sense of it's a hard job because you wear all those different hats, right? And it's likely an oversimplification, but you could look at the profession of law enforcement and say, no, they know what a win looks like. They know their role. Or you could look at social workers or school teachers, but probation officers, because the expectation is to wear those different hats, it is a very difficult job. You have the change agent role, but you also have that legitimate containment and surveillance role, and it's really, really hard to shift those hats, to shift those lenses and perspectives. Okay, you mentioned it, Dianna. I want to talk to you now about the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, CJCC, although I always push back at the alphabet soup that we tend to lean into in criminal justice and particularly corrections. So I'm endeavoring to give the longhand version every time I reference it, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. For listeners not familiar with that term, give us first, I guess, the broad definition, and then we'll drill down to what you're doing out there in Arizona.
Okay, so a CJCC, in its absolute purest form, is a collaborative body where we bring together leaders from the criminal justice system, government leaders, the community leaders, and we're looking to solve problems that no single agency can solve alone. So it's a systems approach. And there's many different CJCCs around the country. Some go by different names and titles. Some are, criminal justice coalitions. Some are criminal justice advisory councils. The one I am in is directly connected to the local government, but some are also run as nonprofits with boards of directors. Some have single counties they serve, some have multiple counties, but all of them have a common purpose that we're evaluating the justice system from a systems perspective.
I love it. I love that approach. Although, as you alluded to, you're in Coconino County. Why is Coconino County slightly different? Unique, maybe unique is a better term.
We are unique in a lot of ways. One of the things that's unique about our CJCC is we are a 50-50 partnership with the city of Flagstaff, that is our most populated municipality, and Coconino County. So that makes it unique, but Coconino is kind of unique in its own right. We are the second largest county in the continental United States. So we have this enormous and vast and geographically very diverse physical geography here. We are over 18,000 square miles. Just to put that in perspective, it's larger than 9 U.S. states. So we have the cities of Flagstaff, which is our county seat, and then Page, Williams, Fredonia, Tucson. We also encompass the Grand Canyon. We have 6 federally recognized tribal communities in Coconino County, and a lot of it is very, very remote. So there's a lot of remote and rural communities that we try to represent and tie together.
Having worked in a rural county, when I was in the state of Florida, kicking off my career, I worked for Okeechobee County, which was a rural county, but also we dealt with some of the variables that you just articulated, up to and including just the vast, not as vast as you just articulated, but just the vastness in between client contacts and what that entails, and that, the sort of nuanced thing that isn't necessarily going to be in the risk needs responsivity playbook when they talk about even stuff like home visits, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of ironic as I reflect on it. So when I returned as a probation officer to my home state of Minnesota, I worked for Ramsey County, which is geographically one of the smallest counties in Minnesota. And I can remember doing field work in Ramsey County, and you could see clients 2-3 minutes apart. And then, as you can attest to in the rural, it's like, well, grab a cup of coffee, Bob. It's going to be 90 minutes till we get to the next field contact.
Easily. And in a lot of our areas, roads are dirt. There's not street signs. So locating a residence can be a real challenge. And then when you get there, residence has a really broad definition a lot of times.
Not to get too tangential, but why not? We're on a podcast, right? What are the observations that me and other individuals had during the lockdowns when clearly the memos went out? Okay, you're no longer required to do residence visits. You can substitute that face-to-face contact with a telephone call, or pending capacity of the agency, a Zoom call or a Teams call. And a colleague of mine told me one of his observations was, when we took that role from the probation officer, the task rather of having to do a home visit, a field visit, which, as you just described, sometimes could take hours. When we sort of took that away and said, no, take the drive out in between, just make the phone call and we'll count that. My contention is it forced a lot of POs to really focus on the value added of what they were doing. In other words, when we said, okay, it's not about seeing them in their home face to face, giving them a breathalyzer, making sure there's no alcohol or drugs or kids in the house, whatever, now leave. We took all that away and said, no, just have an enriching evidence-based practice conversation with them. A lot of navel gazing, because it was like, shit, before I could just get away with saying, hey, boss, it took me 6 hours to see those six clients. And when it was like, no, you can just call them all up. What do you spend your time talking to them about? You remember we trained you all in motivational interviewing and risk assessment and cognitive behavioral interventions. It was a lot of like, oh, now I have to do that because I can't use the excuse of I logged 300 miles doing field work today.
Right.
So did you experience that when, again, you, I assume, said to those folks, field visits are out of the way, we'll waive that condition, but just do a telephone call instead?
Well, I wasn't supervising community supervision officers during the COVID lockdown. I was working for court administration at that time, but was working really closely with adult and juvenile, specifically for the folks who had mental health issues, because that isolation was a real concern. And how do we overcome that isolation? What kind of connections can we continue to make, either over the phone or virtually, a lot of times over a Zoom or a Teams meeting over the, or FaceTiming people through their cell phones. So it was really focused more on how are we ensuring that folks who need connection and need that contact are getting it. So we were working really closely with a lot of our community mental health providers to ensure that they were going out. A lot of conversations took place standing on a driveway, or in a backyard where we could sit down and just meet face to face and check on folks to make sure they weren't over isolating and that they were getting the services that they needed.
Dan, I absolutely love the reframe that you just did there as to the value added of those visits. Whereas, and I hope I don't come off as too cynical, but whereas a lot of folks who look at that and say, okay, I'm out in the community to try to catch guys doing wrong, or to look for an infraction, or to look for a violation. The words that you kept using were, what kind of connection can I make? What kind of connection can I make? Versus, how can I catch this guy? How can I bust this guy? I just love that reframe.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about, is that connection piece, right? And the isolation piece.
And particularly in working with folks that have mental health or substance use issues, that face-to-face, that connection to humanity was so important.
Regular listeners of the show often hear me talking about our TIDES supervision model. But one of the mantras of that model, in our goal to get towards a space of not just regulation, but co-regulation, is we use the phrase, when speaking to your client, ask the questions: do they feel safe and do they feel connected? Mm-hmm. Do they feel safe and do they feel connected? Because if they don't feel safe and they don't feel connected, they're dysregulated. They don't have access to their prefrontal cortex. So guess what, folks? None of your well-intentioned cognitive behavioral interventions are going to take hold when your client is dancing around their amygdala in fight, flight, freeze mode. So yeah, again, that was music to my ears where you're saying, what kind of connection can we make? I want to talk to you about the work you did with, I believe, the city of Tempe. I've always been a big fan of contingency management plans, reward-based plans, token economies, that type of thing.
Yes.
Talk about the incentive program that you developed with the city of Tempe. What problems were you trying to solve? And really, how did that program shift from compliance, which I dread, to meaningful engagement?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. This program I'm really proud of. And, as a behavioral health professional, and I was kind of, crossing over into community supervision as the supervisor, not as a support or a liaison. It was a little bit of a different role. And I walked into a program that had been up and running for a number of years, and we were essentially non-complying people. So it was kind of the way of violating, but their language was non-complying, and we would non-comply people. We would send them back to the court to have that addressed. And I was responsible for signing off on all of those non-compliance submissions. And so just sitting there in the first 3 months and just over and over again, signing off that somebody was being non-complied. And the number one reason when we drilled down into that was their inability to pay. And I very clearly remember sitting at my office one afternoon, and I'm signing off on another case, and I looked more closely at this individual, and this was a 19-year-old woman who had been in special education throughout high school. She did not graduate with a diploma and had gone out and committed a small misdemeanor, nonviolent entity victim offense. And I was about to send her back to court for her inability to pay $500.
Unbelievable.
Had a little bit of a crisis of faith.
Yeah.
I sat there staring at my computer thinking, I don't know that I can do this job. I don't know that this is who I can be. To send this person who had so many challenges already back to court for $500. Knowing that what was going to happen was that $500 wasn't ever going to be wiped away. It was going to compound. Mm-hmm. She was going to end up back on community supervision. All of those fees were going to continue to accrue, and there may be some jail time involved. So I just really wanted to do something different. And it took some time. Did a lot of research, did a lot of education on, epics, risk need responsivity, looked into in the research the myth of punishment, which is the theory that punishment alone is not effective for preventing future crime or changing behavior. I'm a mental health professional, so I had a lot of that CBT and behavior change background. And so I was trying to figure out how to blend all of this together. And, there's two principles that I was really focused on. One is I don't want to eliminate fees entirely.
Right.
And the reason why is because when people pay into something, when they invest time, money, energy into something, they are way more likely to value it. And there's a lot of theory and research that goes into that. But the other thing is I didn't want the inability to pay to be the reason people were failing, because that's an inequitable criminal justice system. And there's a lot of concerns in that as well. We wanted to also, focus on accountability. Like that's a lot of what we do. And we simply kind of just redefined how people could meet that accountability. And what we designed this program to where participants earned credit, monetary credit towards their supervision fees by engaging in known pro-social activities.
Okay.
So those would be like counseling, treatment, substance abuse, education, employment. And we found that people were still able to pay. If they could pay, they would pay what they could. The people where finances weren't a problem, they would pay off their community supervision fees and go on about their life. But there were so many people that just couldn't, or they could pay part of it, but not all of it. And so we wanted to make sure that this program was available to anybody, regardless of your ability to pay, because engaging in pro-social activities should be encouraged no matter what, and it's beneficial to everybody. And by doing that, we didn't stigmatize the inability to pay as well, which was also really important to me. And we made sure that the activities that we provided for people as examples of what you could do were also free. Okay. We didn't want to transition your payment from us to something else. In community service, a lot of times has always been kind of the gold standard. You can do community restitution, you can do this. And I think that is fantastic. And that was absolutely built into the incentives program. But there's a lot of people that really can't engage in community service. And some of that is time constraint. We had people working 2-3 jobs sometimes. We had folks that had childcare issues. Because the community we were in, we had a lot of people that had elder care. We had that sandwich generation where they were taking care of parents that had dementia or Alzheimer's or just on a fixed income and were living with them. And then they also had their, school-age children that they would have to make arrangements for. And, this is an important piece to me, but sometimes there's pet care that you have to take care of. And, so always want to make sure that we factor that in. But we also had geographic constraints, rural areas and, people would come into Tempe, but they would come in from all over the country, honestly, but a lot of times all over from Arizona. We had a lot of people that lived in these very rural areas, and they don't have those community service options, or they're geographically so hard to get to. And then there's the concern about folks with disabilities. Sometimes you just can't physically complete community service options. So we designed this program to overcome all of these challenges, to be aware of everything. And a lot of that is an eye to, increasing that equity and accessibility to people, and just kind of ran with that. And it was amazing as we just saw such success.
I love that you mentioned, first of all, that you not just risk needs responsivity, but the EPICS model into your incentives program. So was it a case of, so often we hear, oh, it's another flavor of the month. What's Dianna doing? No, it's not. We're building upon. It's a yes and, right?
Yes.
And then as you spoke about the pro-social activities, and you listed a few, and then the concept of, you essentially monetize those activities,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Which, and you can tell me, but I assume that helped the practitioner crystallize what we mean by those pro-social activities. I guess maybe I'm coming at this from my lens as a LSMI master trainer, and trust me, people have no problem identifying delinquent behavior, criminal behavior, maladaptive behavior. But you as a probation officer, hey, list 10 pro-social activities your client can engage in. It's like, well, that's not what I'm calibrated to do. I'm supposed to look for the worst in people, kind of thing. Not only did you, like I said, identify those, but you monetize them to make it more concrete, both for the practitioner and the client. But yeah, what a great way to take R&R EPICS, and you mentioned like sort of I forget the article you just cited, whichever.
The myth of punishment.
There you go, the myth of punishment, and bundle it into a great program. So talk about the results. I'm all about outcomes. Share some of the outcomes.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So it was really funny. And I remember so clearly, like it was yesterday, I was trying to develop this program and I was doing all this research, and one of my staff was having trouble with one of their community supervision clients. And I always took those calls, roll it up to me. Yeah. Don't worry about it. And this guy and I had a lovely conversation. He was very polite. He was really trying to do the right thing. And he was telling me, I'm just financially really strapped right now. My kid went into the hospital. I have massive copays. I have medications now I have to, copay for. My hours got cut at work. All of this is super legit. And he's like, I just need to get this behind me. I owe $200 and I don't know how I'm going to make that. And $200 to me, it's going to hurt, but it's not going to mean that I'm going to get evicted. It's not going to mean I'm going to have to choose between buying my child's medication or going to jail, or going back to court. And so I said, hey, listen, I'm working on this concept here. And I want to know if you would be willing to be my little guinea pig. Are you open to this option? And if you are, here's what we're going to do. I want you to take some parenting classes. You mentioned you have kids. We talked a little bit about his kids. Obviously a lot of stress with something medically going on. And I said, if you're willing to take these free parenting classes, give me the feedback. How did it work for you? How was registration? Were you able to get through them? Give me the certificates of completion. It's all free. It's all online. You can do it whenever you want. And if you do these for me and you just check in with me, I will give you credit for that $200 because this is what we're trying to develop. And he said, yeah, I'm all in, give it, let me know. So I sent him the link for the parenting classes, and we checked in a couple of times, and there was, a little bit of wobble here and there about how to register and, how to get their certificates of completion. And I asked him to take 4, and he did, and he emailed me the certificates of completion, and I got back on the phone with him, and I said, I just need you to tell me, how did this work for you?
Yeah.
And he said, let me tell you, I never would have taken a parenting class in my life, and it was incredibly eye-opening. I had been raised a certain way, spare the rod, spoil the child philosophy. I didn't realize about trauma. I didn't realize about communication. I didn't realize that there's a different way to parent. Mm-hmm. And he said, I really gained a lot from taking those parenting classes. And I really appreciate that. And at that point, I knew this was going to work. This was going to be good. And so, documented that he had done this, got the certificates of completion, sent him off to court as compliant. His case was completed. He didn't owe, and he had given me the information I really needed to feel like this was going to be successful.
What a great beta test guinea pig that first client was.
Yeah.
It's shown a light on a lot of the concepts you were talking about. And I've been taking copious notes here. When you were talking about that balance between, well, we're not just going to waive supervision fees, but we also don't want to have a system of essentially modern day debtor's prison. And you used the term investment before. And just now when you spoke of that client, you used the term, well, yeah, he showed me his certificates of completion. And it got me thinking about something I read the other day as I continue to go down the neuroscience rabbit hole, wishing I paid more attention to biology and chemistry in high school. But I was reading something about dopamine, which we've all heard of, and people tend to think of dopamine, or they associate it with, oh yeah, you get a sense of euphoria, that type of thing, which my generation, I fault those anti-drug 1970s TV commercials where the slogan was always, if you recall, Dianna, well, why do you think they call it dope? Right.
Right.
But I discovered, no, that's just one aspect of dopamine. It's also often referred to as the like the completion drug or the satisfaction drug. If you, for example, you read those stories about highly successful people and the common traits they have, and you'll often see, oh, I make my bed first thing in the morning. Well, what does that do? It gives you that sense of satisfaction, that sense of completion, and you get a blast of dopamine. So as you were talking about, well, I got these certificates of completion. I'm thinking, okay, aside, above and beyond of everything he's satisfying as far as his fiduciary obligations to you, he's experiencing that sense of satisfaction that I would contend a lot of folks who are justice impacted, they just don't experience. So again, I love that you've sort of baked all that into the cake.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I remember one young man, and one of the things we really incentivized, we paid a lot of credit for, was getting your GED.
Yeah.
And, the research is just undeniable. The more education you have, the better you're going to do in every sphere. And so for a lot of folks, traditional education settings are very difficult. This was a young man who had struggled with depression and some mental illness and a little bit of substance use and gotten in trouble. So he did not have his GED. He had not graduated high school. And we had, free GED classes through certain nonprofit and NGOs, got him hooked up with them. And he got his GED. And literally beaming and came to our office to show us his GED. And we were so proud. And, it's clearly, like you're saying, it's a dopamine hit for him, but it was a dopamine hit for all of us too. Yep. We were celebrating his success just right along with him, knowing the downstream effects of him being able to get his GED and what employment opportunities will now be available to him.
Yeah, and any of us who have ever run group programming in corrections, whether in the community or in a facility, who have experienced the graduation events and see these grown men, again, high-risk individuals, brought to tears by what you're describing, simply be given a certificate of completion. And I remember more so when I worked in a correctional facility, when we'd have the big graduation parties and bring in the food and hand out their certificates, and just watching these individuals in custody weep that they got this piece of paper. And I'm thinking to myself, I just made that on the copy machine 20 minutes ago, and that's what's bringing you to tears? Yeah, because to your point, those of us on a pro-social trajectory, we got those hits of dopamine by completing things like got our driver's license at 16, graduated from high school, got our first part-time job, got hired in the field of probation or whatnot. But our high-risk clients never experience that. So it's all sort of it's prorated, I guess, what it to get to elicit that response. But yeah, it's all good. That 140% increase in completion rate is nothing to sneeze at as somebody who's studied what we call effect sizes or the impact that you have on outcomes. That is amazing. In addition to that, did you see other sort of, I guess, anecdotal accomplishments like, yeah, we're issuing fewer warrants. We're not arresting people. Not as many folks spending their day in probation violation hearings. Did you see that type of stuff, which I suspect the staff would, that's their sort of reward of, oh, this is making my job easier too.
Absolutely. And like I said, before when I was talking about noncompliance, like if somebody was not able to meet their goals, we sent them back to court. Sometimes we got called into court for contested, violation hearings or revocation hearings. So a lot of, as the program, the months and days and weeks of the program, after it was implemented, we saw fewer violations. We didn't get called into court as often. People were able to complete because that financial piece was not a barrier. And again, that was our number one reason for people being unable to complete. And so, just data-wise, we saw a significant improvement overall in that 140% successful completion rate. That was over the first 2 years after incentives was fully implemented, which is huge and just life-changing for so many people. We also didn't see a significant reduction in revenue for the program. And a lot of that is because people who couldn't pay simply weren't paying.
Exactly.
They just weren't.
Right.
But if you broke that large chunk down into smaller pieces, so if you couldn't pay $50 for the month, but you did $25 worth of incentives credit and you could pay that $25, then people were paying that. And so there's a sense of success that comes along with that as well, but also just that engagement in all those pro-social activities and trying to support and encourage that as well. And there's, a lot of kind of qualitative measures. We had people calling us, like the gentleman I spoke about, saying, I learned so much from these parenting classes. One of the big things that we encouraged people to do, because they were really easy to engage in, they were free, they were online, was financial literacy classes. And, financial literacy just isn't usually taught in schools anymore. It's a big challenge for people. Money management is an abstract concept, so that can be a real challenge for folks. And we would get calls back saying, I had no idea. This really helped me. And then having that feedback to the community supervision staff was amazing too, because again, like you're saying, they really felt like they were supporting people. They really felt like we were focusing on change and providing that opportunity for people. And, I've been asked, like, these programs were all out there before we didn't create these free programs. We didn't create the financial literacy or the parenting classes. These were always available to people and they were always free. Why didn't people take advantage of them before? And I don't fully understand or have an answer for that. But when you incentivize that in a way, it's certainly going to make it easier for people to engage. And a lot of people don't really know that they could benefit from taking a parenting class. Like, but kids don't come with instruction manuals. And so sometimes having that extra help can really support you in your parenting endeavors. And, in the downstream effects, when they were successfully completing, we saw those fewer warrants, we saw fewer arrests. I was really close to the jail commander, and just going out and getting people from the county jail was a huge involvement. There was a lot of time and staff, and, time equals money. So there was a lot of money involved in going and picking people up from wherever they were booked in, bringing them back to our detention center, holding the court hearing, just going through that booking process, the assessment. So all of those reductions were creating benefits throughout this entire justice system and allowing people to focus really more on what their jobs were, kind of as opposed to trying to clean up when people were unable to really complete that.
Speaking of folks being able to focus on their job, you took a step in the right direction by creating your Client of the Month awards. I just love the theme. Basically, it was a long way of saying that you're celebrating successes and at least feeding into the feedback loop of like, hey, what you do does matter. So talk about those Client of the Month awards, the Client of the Year awards. What was the purpose, behind, again, publicly recognizing those people under supervision?
This was so much fun. And it was a little bit of a harebrained idea, honestly, from me.
A lot of great ideas start out as harebrained ideas.
So, as a behavioral health professional, one of the things we're taught is a lot of, you want to reinforce the behavior you want to see. And so I introduced this concept with my staff and I said, we're not looking for 100%. This is not graduation. This is that client that you have seen gone above and beyond. What have they done? Have they struggled with sobriety, but they were able to make 90 meetings in 90 days?
Yeah.
Were they, struggled in school, but they were able to get their GED? Where is just that effort that we want to recognize? And so it took a moment to kind of gain some momentum with the staff, and then we would get into meetings and it was kind of a group effort. Okay, I want to talk about Joe, and Joe, he's just really struggled with his sobriety. He relapsed, but, he's now engaged. He's got his sponsor. And I'm like, yep, that works. Let's go with that. Because that's the behavior we want to really reinforce, that you're doing the right thing. You're on that right track. And also part of cognitive behavioral reinforcement, right,
yep,
is you want to make those intervals really short. So, graduating off community supervision in 3 years while you're struggling to maintain your sobriety is not enough of a reinforcer,
Correct.
So, we wanted to do this. And like you were just saying, I got on Publisher and created this nifty little certificate and printed it out on a nice bond paper and got a little folder and really wanted to highlight the folks that had done great work. And so I worked to get the city council involved. And it was originally under a kind of a committee, the Health and Human Services and Public Safety Committee or something along those lines. And so that was great, but it was during the day and a lot of people couldn't show up. But we were trying to make a really big deal and eventually got a city council member to kind of champion this cause.
Okay.
And got in front of the big city council meeting at, after 5:00 and really important just to recognize again that these people were doing the best that they could. And a lot of times that is monumentally significant to them and to their lives. And what was really fun is when I got the okay that we were going to be in front of the city council, I started looking back at the police reports and finding the arresting officers. And I think this was really important because a lot of times, law enforcement, I'm very sympathetic to them. They see people on the absolute worst day of their lives. And, sometimes they've seen this person more than once, or they know that family, or, the circumstances seem so insurmountable. And so we invited them to attend the city council meeting where we were presenting the Client of the Month Supervision Awards. Nobody told me not to, so I created a Community Supervision Client of the Year Award to recognize some super significant progress that one of our clients had made. And The arresting officers were invited, their sergeants were invited. We invited the detention staff because a lot of times they get forgotten in communicating. And they had seen every last one of these folks because everybody passed through our detention facility. And all of the community supervision staff came. Our leadership was there. And it was an incredible experience, honestly. It almost brings tears to my eyes in thinking about it because so many of these individuals are on the margins of society. They don't get that recognition. They are trying their absolute hardest. And sometimes that is really overwhelming in a lot of ways. And they have made a mistake. And we don't want to judge people for the worst day of their life. Everybody is bigger and better than the mistakes that they have made. I have made a zillion of mistakes in my life, and I don't want anybody defining me for that. Recognizing, and it was just extraordinary. It was just an extraordinary experience. Again, that dopamine hit to our community supervision staff to be there and to support our clients that had done just really remarkable work for them. They had just really shown such strength and such resilience and such success. And what was kind of funny on one hand is that we had a client and he had really struggled with his sobriety. We were going to recognize him as Supervision Client of the Month. He wanted to bring his sponsor. He wanted to invite his sponsor. So, he called up and said, is this okay? And we're like, public meeting, bring as many people as you want. So a lot of people actually did invite their family members, their sponsors, their peer supports. And he called back and he said, my sponsor doesn't believe me. Can you talk to him? And I said, sure. So I got him and I said, it's all confidential. So it's all, your confidentiality away, but I'll talk to your sponsor. And I got on the phone with the guy and he's like, what's going on? I just need to know, kind of protective, and I said, here's what's going on. City council, this date and time, we're going to recognize him with an award. And he was just in disbelief. And it finally came out. He's like, I just don't believe that probation is doing this because I've never seen probation do anything nice for anybody.
Wow.
Which was a hugely powerful statement. And I said, I'm so sorry that has been your experience. I hope we're going to work to change that. Another client said her family came, but they didn't believe her. It was real. They thought it was some sort of TikTok joke.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Like
we were playing a practical joke on her. And I said, no, it's real. It's true. We're going to be there to recognize the changes and the progress people have made.
I think it's brilliant that you tracked down and invited the arresting officer. Because what you said is so true. They see individuals doing the worst thing they did on the worst day of their life, and the corrections officers, same thing. I always find when dealing with law enforcement that they are just eager to learn more about what makes our clients tick. I used to teach at a graduate level. It was a criminal justice leadership course. So I'd get a blend of corrections folks and law enforcement folks. But I can tell you, when I introduced criminogenic need to police officers, it was so eye-opening because the clouds just lifted. It's like, oh, I thought this guy was just an a-hole that I arrested every Friday. But now I see because they can even anecdotally assess them. Like, oh yeah, he's riddled with antisocial peers, struggling with substance abuse.
I've known his father. I've known his uncle. Yeah.
But they just didn't have a way to sort of scientifically look at it. But it just sort of, the clouds parted. And I imagine, again, inviting the officers, it reminds me of, I've been promoting the Missing Story book by Stephen Pitts and Imans Mosers. And in that book, they include a great quotation from Fergus McNeil, kind of talking about what we're talking about. Probation really needs a good public relations firm because our stakeholders, up to and including our criminal justice partners, the city council, they don't know what we do. And Fergus says, you could drive down the street and point to a hospital and ask people, what do they do? And they'll tell you. You could drive down the street and pass a school building and say, what do they do in there? Oh, they educate our children. You drive past a probation office and ask, what do they do in there? Nobody knows. Your city council doesn't know. The police officers don't know. And I'm not faulting them for that. I'm saying it's our own fault that we really don't publicize the great work we do, which what you're doing is a great step in the right direction with that. I absolutely love that.
Thank you. It was really fun. And we had a sea of uniforms. I didn't know if they would come. And I think sometimes they just came out of curiosity. But we had a sea of uniforms all the way up to the commander and the chief of police, which was amazing.
But just think about, again, within that sea of uniforms, now I'm laughing thinking of the old shampoo commercial, and they tell two people, and they tell two people, whatever the shampoo commercial was. But yeah, right. Those officers, those commanders, that chief, they're going to have a conversation with at least one other person, and it's almost going to have like that trickle down effect of like, oh, you wouldn't know it, but yeah, probation does X, Y, and Z, and as evidenced by those Client of the Month awards and Client of the Year awards, it works. I mean, it works. I tell folks, you mentioned the corrections officers, and I say this even of people in probation that work years, if not sadly decades, in intensive supervision units. I'll tell them it's almost like you went to medical school and you spent your entire career working in the burn unit or in the trauma unit or urgent care, which I'm not saying there's not a great need for that, but go spend some time in neonatal or go to the physical therapy unit. You're only seeing the worst of the worst. You're giving yourself this professionally skewed lens that eventually I contend, I don't want to go down the reticular activation system role, but it just gets you to look at, for the faults in people. It's like if I say to you, Dianna, yellow Volkswagen, you're just going to see yellow Volkswagens all weekend. Yes. But if you say, oh, there's bad in that person I arrested, there's evil in that person I arrested, they'll never, you're never, that's what you tend to look for, right? So kudos for moving us in the right direction with public relations. I hope people out there listening in a capacity to make those decisions explore and look at what they could do to, again, highlight the successes of the clients.
And that's one of the things, just to dovetail off of that, a lot of times we don't hear about probation like you're talking about until it's that worst case scenario, the one outlier where somebody absconded or, they were, successfully completed off probation and then something tragic happens. Right. They commit a incredibly violent offense. And so we kind of just shifted that into, let's talk more about how well we're doing and how the vast majority of these folks are doing really well under community supervision. And like you're talking about earlier, the role of the community supervision staff is to connect into substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, educational opportunities, doing so much more than simply compliance.
Yeah. And when you talked about, what makes the news, unfortunately, it's only the failures. And I reflect on my career. I never got a call from the newspaper or the television station wanting to know more about the early discharge report I wrote recommending somebody get off probation early. Right. Yeah.
Or the guy that did 90 meetings in 90 days.
Exactly. Right. No, it's always the high profile, off the rails. Exactly. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the Justice Bus, which I just love. Again, what barriers were you trying to address with this novel concept?
So the Justice Bus is part of the CJCC up here in Coconino County, and it's not a bus per se. That's a whole conversation about actually getting a vehicle. But what it is because of our geographic challenges, because we are so large that getting to court, just physically making it to that court hearing can be incredibly difficult for a lot of people. And there was some data that was gathered about the failure to appear bookings in our county jail that were increasing. And where were those population areas where the FTAs were the highest? So we targeted those specific areas, and not surprisingly, they're the farthest away from our superior court based here in Flagstaff. So we decided, and this started before I got on board, to start holding court in those remote communities. So it was started out as a traveling court. We're going to if people are out of custody, they can file to have their changes of plea and sentencing done. If there's a failure to appear warrant, we can address that. And when I got on board, and I think a lot of this is the behavioral health background, I expanded that concept to include a lot of the resources and services that people in the general community need, but a lot of times people who are justice involved really need, but are afraid maybe a little bit to ask, or they're not aware these services exist. And sometimes we're not very good about promoting our, community resources. So we started with the core of the court. So that's the superior court, and our presiding judge can quash warrant from all of our justice courts. And then we have agreements from a lot of our municipal courts to where he is able to quash warrants. And then we call up and we reset a new court date. We have a little over 66% successful hearing attendance for the warrants that we have quashed and the dates that we've set for folks. So that's really good, because that's way better than just normal court hearings. But we also have our superior court clerk's office. So a lot of that is those services that are specific to the superior court that are not available in the rural communities. So we do name changes, marriage licenses, passports. We can provide Prop 200 expungement applications. And then our NGOs, our non-government entities that are coming along with us. We have our community behavioral health and substance abuse treatment. So like if you have a DUI, here, you're going to need to do DUI screening through a behavioral health agency, so we can help set up appointments for that. We can kind of demystify that process by talking to those providers. Health and Human Services comes with our Narcan distribution. So we have a pathway for folks to get those Narcan kits. We partner with Arizona at Work, which does employment resources. And a lot of times their focus is on hard to employ people. So people with justice involvement, felony convictions, our target population will have rent and utility assistance. We have new housing resources. Our Veterans Justice Outreach Coordinator a lot of times partners with us. We also can do voter registration. We have an express vote machine, which is an adaptive voting machine. So people who are a little bit concerned about what that might look like can come and use this machine to experience what, in a very tiny capacity, what a voting situation might look like, and just, again, demystify that process in a less stressful, low anxiety. We have a lot of community organizations that come with us. We're going to start partnering with our local food bank. And the whole idea is to, just avoid arrests on outstanding warrants, resolve fines and fees. They can pay the fines and fees there. We can complete these changes of plea and sentencing so that we don't have to worry about transporting people from one location to another. So we're going to, do a change of plea and a sentencing at the Superior Court. You're going to get released from jail. You've got a 2.5 hour, transition back to your community. People are also able to check in with probation, ask questions. We've helped with guardianships. We've filed civil rights restoration, expungement applications. We've done sealing of records, and then they've gotten certified copies of some of those records, like divorces and marriage certificates that you'll need for certain types of employment or certain types of certification. One individual in our tribal community spent over a year trying to resolve a birth certificate issue. And we were able to help them within their community at this Justice Bus event, get a court order and provide the information onto all of the next steps. It's about, really just dignity and fairness and trust being seen by this system that's bigger than any one of us. And just to give you a little bit of metrics, at one Justice Bus event in Page, which is 129 miles or 2.5 hours drive from Flagstaff. And that's ideal conditions, right? That's not rain or snow or, dust storms.
Yeah.
We resolved 4 felony cases that involve separate defendants, which could otherwise have required at least 11 hearings in Flagstaff. And this event alone saved just those 4 defendants from driving over 2,800 miles, which in today's fuel costs, that's almost $900 in fuel cost savings. We also have victim witness services on hand. So if people have questions, we had one event in a rural community where a lady came and she wanted to specifically talk to victim witness, and they had a very intense private conversation, but that opportunity was provided to her. And I don't know what they talked about, but they were able to help her, point her in the right direction, give her some information. And, she didn't have to drive very far for that. It was within her community in a very relaxed atmosphere. So there's a little bit less of stigma associated with that. And this is just super fun. One of the things that caught us completely off guard when we were in our tribal community is that a couple came to get their marriage license, which was provided by the Superior Court. And then they turned to me and they were like, "Hey, do you think the judge would marry us?" And I said, "I'm pretty sure he would. Let me ask." So we did a wedding, and to date we've done 8 weddings at our Justice Bus events, which is just so much fun.
How cool.
And we're truly honored that people would choose to celebrate, such a significant milestone with us. And we never saw that coming, but we're so excited each and every time that it happens.
As you speak about the Justice Bus, Dianna, it got me thinking you're essentially operationalizing the responsivity principle. You're being so responsive to these needs, and
good point.
And you're not refuting, but addressing something that my head explodes whenever I hear or pose a question, which is, well, we've always done it this way.
Yes.
Why do these people have to drive to downtown to get them? Well, because we've always done it this way, Dianna. Okay,
yes,
that's not a good reason to continue as such. Yeah, what a great example.
Well, and we are finding ways to support those more marginalized communities. We've done 2 Justice Bus stops, as we call them, at our local homeless shelter, and we've done it at a community organization that supports the unsheltered. Those are the people they trust.
Yeah.
So when we can come there and, resolve a warrant, it's going to be really important. And when you're unsheltered, if you're picked up on a warrant, the likelihood of you losing everything that you own, including possibly your pet, if you're taken into custody, is just huge. And it's such a disruptive and traumatic event. So many of these warrants are for low-level offenses. They're shoplifting, they're trespassing, and not to minimize that there is an entity victim in shoplifting, but these are also offenses of desperation. And so when we can connect people to Arizona at Work and they can look at job opportunities, we can connect them into housing resources, or, one of our community partners has a bike program so that you can get a bike so that now you can get from place to place. It's really impactful in the long run.
I'm confident, Dianna, that there are listeners out there thinking, oh, I want to steal some of this from Dianna, but they're feeling either overwhelmed or under-resourced, or they don't have a criminal justice coordinating council. What would you tell them? What's a good first step to take?
It's those relationships. It's that collaboration. If you can find somebody in the community who's willing to host one of these events, and these are going across the country. There's a lot of different organizations that are supportive of this. Resolving a warrant without arresting somebody is a very financially friendly resolution, because you're not taking law enforcement off the street to, transport this person. And in a rural community, that transport could be 2 or 3 hours of taking someone from point A to booking them in detention. You're saving the costs of somebody going into detention who may have severe medical needs or mental health medications that are going to need to be addressed when they get into detention. You're saving those court costs of the rehearings for, having, an FTA warrant. So if we can resolve this in a community setting, it's across the board a better resolution.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Dianna, if I have you back on the show in 5 years, look into your crystal ball, and what do you think we might be talking about in your utopian future?
My utopian future, if I wake up tomorrow and everything's the way I want it to be, we're not going to be able to change the criminal justice system as it is, but we can make those small changes that will have significant ripple effects. We talked a little bit about, the costs of fines and fees. And that's just a way that the justice system has been funded, but it's an unstable revenue stream. And so I'd like to see us find better ways to support our criminal justice system without the use and reliance on fines and fees, which is constantly declining. We're in an economically challenging environment right now, and that's going to happen. This is all tied into humanizing our interactions with people. I like to talk about the social determinants of health, because again, behavioral health provider, if you've got to make the decision, as I kind of talked about a little bit before, of paying for your children's medication or paying your community supervision fees, which could issue a warrant and land you in jail, that's a decision I never want to be in the situation of having to make personally, but I know it's a decision that people make every day. And that has community impacts as well. When you're putting people into the impossible situation. So if we want to humanize this system, if we want to talk about how to respond better to the people in the system and make the system more responsive to the people in it, however that looks in my utopian universe, that's what I want to target.
I love that vision. And you mentioned it's all about relationships and communication. Dianna, if you would be so kind, if you wouldn't mind sharing your email address, I will embed that within the show notes of this episode. So if listeners out there want to continue building a relationship and spreading the good works that you're doing out there in Arizona, they can do so directly by contacting you.
Yes, they're more than welcome to do so.
Dianna, thank you so much for joining us on the Criminologist Podcast. Until we meet again, take care and keep up the good work you're doing out there in Arizona.
Thank you so much, Joe. Keep up your good work as well.
All right, Dianna, take care. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
As we close out this conversation, I want to thank Dianna Kalandros, Director of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council in Coconino County, Arizona, for joining me on the Criminologist Podcast. What I appreciate most about this discussion is that it brought us back to a question that sits at the center of so much effective justice work. What would it look like if our systems were designed not only to respond to failure, but to create more opportunities for success? Throughout this episode, Dianna helped us think about collaboration, incentives, removing barriers, humanizing supervision, and the role of criminal justice coordinating councils in bringing the right people to the table. These are not abstract ideas. They show up in real practices. from incentive-based approaches that help people move forward to efforts that reduce unnecessary barriers created by fines, fees, transportation, access, and system complexity. One part of the conversation that really stayed with me was Dianna's discussion of the Client of the Month project. On the surface, recognition can seem like a small thing, but in justice work, how we see people matters. When stakeholders begin to see clients not only as cases, risks, violations, or problems to be managed, but as people capable of progress, growth, and change, that shift can have a powerful humanizing effect. We also discussed the broader importance of criminal justice coordinating councils and how local systems can use collaboration, data, shared problem solving, and community engagement to respond more thoughtfully to long-standing challenges. Dianna was kind enough to provide several links and resources for listeners who want to learn more about criminal justice coordinating councils, incentive-based supervision, Coconino County's work, and the Justice Bus Initiative. I will embed those links in the show notes for this episode. As always, thanks for listening to the Criminologist Podcast. If this conversation resonated with you, please share it with a colleague, subscribe to the show, and continue asking how we can make probation, courts, corrections, and community justice more effective, more collaborative, and more human. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
And he said, let me tell you, I never would have taken a parenting class in my life. And it was incredibly eye-opening. I had been raised a certain way, spare the rod, spoil the child philosophy. I didn't realize about trauma. I didn't realize about communication. I didn't realize that there's a different way to parent. And he said, I really gained a lot from taking those parenting classes. And I really appreciate that. And at that point, I knew this was going to work. This was going to be good.
The Criminologist Podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, training opportunities, program design, or interview requests, visit theparagongroup.llc.com. To learn more about the TIDES supervision model, a trauma-informed, desistance-based approach to community supervision, please visit the TIDESLLC.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to check out the Criminologist YouTube channel for additional content, including exclusive video interviews and international insights. Both the Criminologist Podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Don't forget to give the show a 5-star review. And as always, thank you for listening.